one of the most definitive aspects to his camera work is the perfection of his camera. So if you watch a Fincher film, his camera will always follow exactly to the T the movement of the actor. So if a character's walking across an environment, the camera will exactly match their pace, their velocity, and their speed. And if a character sits up from a chair, the camera will push up with them. And it'll even follow the movements of an actor's head. So if it's just like a medium shot of someone sitting down, if the actor, for example, is looking downward and then the actor looks upwards, the camera will literally match that action and slowly tilt upwards, so that the camera is an extension of the character and follows precisely the movements of the main character, which makes you engage with the character more so as an audience member.
And when he films, he's also a master of hiding CGI in plain sight and special effects in plain sight. Obviously, he's very experienced with groundbreaking special effects with films like The Social Network, where he created twins using Armie Hammer and a double, and then specifically in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, where they had to age and de-age Brad Pitt throughout an entire person's life, so doing old versions and young versions of him.
And it's not like it's something like a big action sci-fi superhero movie. It's these special effects are kind of hidden in plain sight, like you said.
Yeah, like generally when we're inside a house or apartment, he's got green screen on the windows and he's creating a CGI world outside of the house or the windows specifically. We've talked about that on Gone Girl. And he also does this effect, which I've talked about before, but I want to do real quick, where he does this double shot editing technique where a lot of the time when he has two characters on camera at the same time, not always, but generally there's a good amount of scenes where he'll put space between them in the center of the frame. This allows him to use different takes of the same shot to create the best shot that he thinks is best for the scene. So maybe he'll take use take 12 from Rooney Mara's aspect and maybe take 15 from Mark Zuckerberg or Jesse Eisenberg's side and put those together into one shot, so that it gives him a lot of diversity in what he wants to use. And so that for him, like he likes to use, like you said, he uses so many different shots and so many different takes to get what he needs and what he wants.
Traditionally, films are shot with one camera, and they'll shoot one side of the scene, light it, set up the production, and they'll film that actor's side. And then when they're wrapped with that actor's part of the scene, they'll move the production on the other side, and then they'll relight for the other actor, and then they'll shoot that actor's scene, and then they cut it together. But he sees that as extremely time-consuming and kind of a waste. And so he's always shot his scenes with at least two cameras rolling at the same time. And this gives him the ability to, first of all, get as much coverage as possible by filming as many takes as he's known for, because he doesn't have to worry about resetting the set, lighting for the other side of the room. He just lights the room and shoots everything. And then also, the more you shoot, the more scenes the more times the actors can act the scene out. And so that gives him more options editing-wise to choose from their acting, because maybe you're filming one actor, and if you're only using one camera, maybe the other actor did something great on a take, but you're not even filming. So this way, he's filming everything at all times, so he can capture all the coverage he wants.
And the reason why Fincher was able to now develop the style of shooting so many takes and two cameras at once, maybe sometimes three cameras at once, is he was one of the early mainstream filmmakers in Hollywood and probably internationally to start using digital cameras and high-def cameras in the early 2000s. And I think the first film he did with digital cameras was Zodiac. And this was groundbreaking because obviously it took a while for high-definition cameras to at least match film. And, we saw it with 28 Days Later, where Danny Boyle used digital cameras, and it had a unique look to it, but it wasn't in terms of quality.
I don't even think it was HD yet.
Yeah, it was maybe
1280.
I think it was HD. It was like DSLRs he was using. But Fincher finally, they had this new high def format, not quite what they have today with 8K and 4K cameras and like Reds and Dragons. But
it wasn't. He didn't start using 4K until Social Network, so it was just standard HD for Zodiac, which is crazy.
And so this allowed Fincher to save money. He's not rolling film, and allowed him to, you can basically film as much as you want.
Yeah, and the thing with Fincher is obviously famous for using so many takes, and people think it's like he's like this drill sergeant who's just doing take after take after take. But it's not quite as bad as it's been made to seem, because like you just said, since he shoots digitally, he can just keep running the camera. He doesn't have to worry about changing the film, which takes between 5 to 10 minutes every time. He doesn't have to worry about resetting each scene for when they shoot the other side.
Or running out of film.
Like, so there's all they do is they light the room, whatever environment they're in, they light that, and then they shoot for 10 hours. And they don't have to worry about changing anything. They set the cameras up. And this allows him to do, he does all these takes because he doesn't have to change anything. He doesn't have to change the film. He doesn't have to change the set. And so that gives him the ability. It's not like these actors aren't working 18-hour days. They're still working the same amount of days, same amount of hours. But typically on a film set, an actor will be there for like 10 to 12 hours, but they'll be filming on screen for maybe 2 hours in total, acting. Because so much time is spent for actors waiting for the set to get ready, waiting for the light to get ready, waiting for the cameras to change, the film to change. So they spend most of their time actually waiting around on set. But with Fincher, if they're there, they're filming and they're acting in front of the camera, and he wants them to act as long as he can possibly have them each single day. So he wants his actors to act for like 8 hours a day rather than the 2 hours a day.
Yo, they better act that long. I mean, you're getting paid $5 million a movie.
Yeah.
You better not complain about working 8 hours of acting, 10 hours of acting.
Yeah, and also the theory behind why he does numerous takes actually makes a lot of sense, because he makes it so that, so say for example you're an actor and they're filming in a set which is supposed to be your home. You as the actor, you're walking on that set for the first time. You've never been there before. And this is supposed to be a place where your character has been living for a while. And like, say for example, you have to go and get something out of your fridge, and that's the action you have to do in the scene. Well, typically when that happens, the actor is doing that for obviously the first time they've ever opened that particular fridge in that particular setting. Obviously, like, they'll do the best they can to make it seem like they've done this 1,000 times, but it still doesn't look like they've done that act 1,000 times.
Yeah, but that theory only applies to in like that kind of situation, that kind of scene, like rather than if they're investigating a crime scene and that they're never have supposed to.
No, that's the point, because he'll have his actors do the same action, like a mundane act, like that 50 times. So he's having them do takes like that as well, because he wants it to feel like this is that character's home, and they've made this a cup of coffee here 1,000 times, so it has to look like it. And so he'll have them do take after take after take to make them feel like, to create this authenticity to their performance, to make them do the act again. And the same thing applies to the acting, where actors come into each scene with the preparation that they've had. They've done their homework, and they have a plan for how they want to execute their scenes. Obviously, they'll be open to collaboration. But Fincher, taking the same theory of having them perform the same action over again to make it even redundant and more natural, he does the same thing with the acting, where he has the actors act out the scenes over and over and over and over again to get to this point where everything they had planned and set before they got on set is thrown out the window, and they're just in the moment coming up with a new kind of performance each time, and it becomes more authentic the more times they do it.
Fincher seems to be drawn to specific characters and specific stories, and he seems to be fascinated with the perversions of human beings. He likes to open us to the worlds of unorthodox characters,
serial killers,
do bold things like serial kill, whether it be start a fight club, frame your spouse for murder, age in reverse. He seems to have also, like you just said, a fascination with serial killers, and he in my opinion, he probably made the best fictional serial killer movie, as well as the best real factual serial killer movie with Seven and Zodiac.
Well, like we've talked about before, everyone's drawn to these kinds of characters. That's why. What's the most popular podcast in the world? The true crime one?
For a true crime podcast, Crime Junkies is number one. And true crime podcasts are just on fire anyways.
Yeah, and there's so many movies about killers and investigations. There's so many cop shows and detective shows. There is a fascination with the dark side of humanity, and I think Fincher is not afraid to explore that. And he's not afraid to explore the perverse nature of people, because on the surface, people generally seem to have similar interests and nothing too extreme, but behind closed doors, you don't really know people, and people are into all sorts of strange things, strange compared to maybe the societal norms that we're used to. And so he's not afraid to show those facets of reality and those kinds of people and those kinds of stories. And I think that he's just fascinated in how dark people can become. Another aspect to his filmmaking is he rarely uses close-ups. If you watch his films, He mostly films with wide masters, mediums, medium closes, and he rarely uses the close-up. And when he does use the close-up, it's for a very particular reason where he's trying to point out that this moment here is very important, and so you have to pay attention to it. And so I think most filmmakers, they use close-ups because they look nice, and they're not really using it for any kind of storytelling device, which he uses it for a specific purpose, not just because it looks cool, but because you need to really pay attention to this right here. So that's why I'm doing a close-up of the shot. And it really contrasts with the rest of his films and really makes you pay attention to these moments.
Yeah, and Fincher also never writes movies that he directs. I think there's maybe one project he's written. I think it was a short film or video short. Aside from that, he never writes screenplays for the movies he directs. He never writes, like, which obviously isn't unheard of. Obviously there are other directors like Chris Nolan who writes and directs pretty much only scripts that he comes up with and his ideas.
It's true, but that's not to say that he's not involved in the writing process of a film.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a con or anything.
But he's not actually like credited as a writer, and he's not writing the script. But what happens when he signs on to a movie, he actually works with the screenwriter to change things and rewrite all the time. So he works as like a kind of like an editor of a magazine or an editor of a book, where he, like, for example, with Social Network, he worked with Aaron Sorkin for 3 weeks, and they changed numerous things in the screenplay to his liking. And Sorkin changed dialogue, he changed scenes, he changed moments, and they developed new ideas. So he collaborates with his screenwriters to change the script in a certain way that suits his vision that he has for the movie, so that when they're shooting, it's not shooting from the screenwriter's script, it's shooting from this new script that they collaborate on. And now, so no, he's not a writer, but he is very much involved in the rewriting of the scripts every single time.
Yeah, as most directors are, because again, as we said, they're in charge of the entire creative vision of the film.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Some things that are very synonymous with Fincher are his practical lighting. You always see where the lights are. Oftentimes in films, the lighting can be really beautiful, but you're like, where's this light coming from? It can be coming from impossible spaces in an environment. But Fincher always makes it visible, the lights that are producing the visuals in the scene. And as an audience member, that makes you feel more engaged, and it makes it seem more realistic, because you can see, oh, the light right there on the wall is providing the light in the room rather than some light off screen, some studio light. And then that engages you more with the environments and adds to the believability of the scenes. Another stylistic consistency with his films are the color palettes. He loves to use yellows and blues, obviously desaturated, but if you look at all of his films, it's a constant contrast between yellow tones and blue tones. And yellow and blue are on completely opposite sides of the color wheel, so they're very engaged. Those colors are very engaging for us visually when they're on the screen together, and also they can reflect different facets of each character, the two sides of one coin for each character. So you'll always see yellows and blues in his films.
His opening titles are usually one of the most exciting parts of films, and also he pulls you into the mood of his films with his opening titles. He doesn't do it in every movie, but obviously the most bold one he ever did was for Seven. And then to contrast that, for a film like Gone Girl, his opening sequence is really just B-roll of a town to kind of give you a sense of where you are in this town in Missouri, in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And also he works a lot, obviously his most recent film. Thank you for watching Raiders of the Lost podcast. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Listen to the audio format of Raiders of the Lost podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes every Monday and Thursday. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost podcast.